Hello and welcome back to Ikon Coaching. My name's Kirk Wayman and I'm one of the coaches here. Today, we're going to talk about 3 ways that great leaders listen.
The keys to get started.
It's easy as a leader to fall into the trap of believing that you have to do all the talking, that when there's a meeting going on, that you're the one that's supposed to present, you're the one that's supposed to fill the space with your words. You have to come with a presentation. And you can watch leaders nervously do this sometimes. Have you ever been to one of those meetings where a leader will call the team together and then they start out by setting the agenda and then they just fill all the space. They just tell everybody about their ideas and their vision and what they've been thinking. And it feels like they're trying to lead the room, but in fact, what they're doing is just filling all the space. Great leaders understand that it's not their primary job to do the thinking, to be the decider, to be in charge, and certainly not to do all the talking. Great leaders have learned to listen. The first way that great leaders listen is they spend regular time with their team. This is done through formal and informal mechanisms. We have regularly scheduled meetings, but we also have informal places that we can sit with people, talk with people, walk with people, things that happen sort of happenstance. And yet in those times, you're having a different kind of conversation. Every organization has a formal and an informal communication system, and you want to insert yourself into both of them. And then in those places, listen. Ask people what's going on in their lives, because there's 2 kinds of things you want to listen for. One, what are their formal ideas about the business, about their work, about products that are coming or projects they're working on, but also how are they doing as a person? When trying to elicit or understand what causes intrinsic motivation with people, you have to hear more than just the structured or formal parts of their jobs. You have to hear what's going on inside of their emotions, what's going on inside of their dreams, their insights, things that may even seem disconnected from the actual work itself. But that's the organic context in which all this work is taking place. And you want to understand that as well. Spending regular time with people in formal and informal ways, and then when you're with people, doing listening, a listening space, letting them talk. Now, here's a few little things to keep in mind. If you're an extrovert, like I am, we have a tendency to think out loud. We have a tendency to think, we talk about things on a regular basis, and we filter with our ears. We might put 5 or 6 things out in front of us and play with them for a while to figure out what we actually think, where introverts much more likely to process internally. And so they filter with their lips. What comes out of their mouth, they've already thought about, and they know this is what I think. So when you're processing with someone in formal or informal communication systems, you have to pay attention to who are they? How do they process information? Because when you're listening, you got to make sure that you're listening with their personality and preferences in mind, not just your own. So number 1, you have to spend regular time with people. And if you can develop rhythms around that, it's even better. You don't want to wait until there's a crisis or a problem. You don't want to wait until you need time with people to have already established the rhythms in which you spend time with people. You want to curate that space. You want to build that space. Relationship and trust is in some part just time spent with people. And so if you can develop a rhythm around spending time with key members of your team or the whole team together, when you need that space, it'll pre-exist. It'll already be waiting for you to use it in various ways. Trust and relationship is just time spent with people. A lot of us come up through the workforce we start our careers doing tasks, and some of us spend years, maybe even a few decades doing tasks, where productivity is something like getting things done, getting tasks done. But leadership is a combination of task orientation and relational orientation. And the process of building a team and building the kind of trust it takes to be effective in a team has a lot of relational work involved in it. It's the work of building teams. And to do that, you just spend time with people. So, number 1, leaders learn to listen by spending regular and rhythmic times with their people so they have this space that they can use to understand what's going on and be able to hear what people are thinking. Spending time with people is a great way to listen. But if you want to make that an even richer space, an even more productive space where you can listen more deeply, you learn to ask great questions. And great questions have two main attributes to it. Number one, they're open-ended. An open-ended question is simply asking questions that can't be answered yes or no. Do you like this product? That's a yes or no question. But how do you feel about this product is an open-ended question. And it allows space for someone to come back and begin to fill that space with their own perspectives and thoughts. The second attribute, great attribute of a question, is it's an empty question. And empty questions are questions that don't reveal your thoughts or your thinking. They don't let the person know how smart you are about the subject already. They're just empty. They're void of any kind of context that you might be adding. They also don't use trigger words or activated words. They don't have an agenda built into the question itself. It's just empty. And the greatest empty question is something like, why? Why is just this open void. It's a vacuum, and vacuums need to be filled. It's a principle of the universe. And when you ask an empty question, it elicits a much more significant response. So learn to ask open-ended questions that are also empty of your thoughts and feelings and perspective. When someone's talking and they're sharing and you've asked them an open-ended question, it's really helpful to ask follow-up questions that are empty. Things like, why is that? Or why do you think that? Or how come you feel that way? Or simply just say more. What else? Let a person start to build a dialogue or a framework around this time you're spending with them instead of jumping in with your thoughts and your perspective as soon as they're done talking. I don't know if you've noticed this, but most of us aren't listening to someone when they're talking. We're thinking about what they're saying and formulating our response to it before they're even done. Most of us are actually pretty terrible listeners. One of the ways that you can practice this is to not think, but stay curious about what someone is saying, and then ask a follow-up question. When they're done talking, ask a follow-up question to let them explore it even further, and then paraphrase back what you think they've just said to make sure you understand it before you start to develop your own response to it. The second way to be a great listener is to listen for taboos. Literally listen for what's not being said. To be able to paraphrase back to someone what they just got done saying is super helpful. But if you can start to listen for what's not being said, you'll often find the juice. There are things that people are avoiding. They're not talking about them on purpose. And sometimes it's where the real good stuff is. Sometimes you need to understand that there's a conflict going on, and the conflict is between two people, and they're just not talking about it. They've formed an artificial harmony, and you can kind of sense that there's some tension in the air. And every time you ask some question about what's going on or what might be happening, they always avoid that spot or this subject or talking about this person. And pretty soon you can start to see that there's an avoidance going on. They're not talking about it. Another place that taboos show up is there's a way in which all organizations or teams function. We do things this way. We always do things this way, and that's the reasonable way to do it, which means to do it another way is unreasonable or abnormal or maybe even wrong. And once something has become wrong, we don't go there. But when you have a repeating problem inside of an organization, it is often very helpful to learn how to wander into the places that we don't go, because sometimes that's where the solution is. And so as a leader, when you're listening to your team talk and you're trying to resolve a reoccurring problem, it can be very helpful to recognize where we don't go and what we're not talking about. Listen to the empty space and see if you can wander in there in your thinking. You'll very often find the creative and innovative solutions that you're looking for. The third thing to do, and I think this is probably the most important, is we don't just listen to words and we don't listen to the lack of words. We actually learn to listen to behavior. It's fairly safe to say that humans are goal-oriented. We are oriented towards things we're trying to accomplish. If we're trying to get from here to there in all kinds of areas of our life, and as a result of that, there's these embedded goals, things that we want to see get done. It can be from simple things to grand things. But from that, we get this idea that all behavior is motivated. So if you want to understand what's motivating people, listen to their behavior. Now, you listen to their words too, because words matter. But when words and behavior don't match, the behavior is more important, especially when it's a pattern of behavior. There are conflicts that exist within ourselves and within teams where we say one thing, but we consistently do another. We say we want to trust each other, we want to be vulnerable, we want to have good teamwork, and yet the behavior is oriented around something else. It's around distrust or lack of vulnerability. It's oriented around making sure I get what I need, and I don't really care if you get what you need. There's a lose-win or a win-lose scenario going on. What you want to listen for is behavior. How are people actually behaving on your team? How are you behaving? And when you can start to see the patterns of behavior and you listen to them, which is an interesting idea, then you can start to see where words and behaviors don't match, and you can start to adjust how the team is listening to itself. So great leaders don't just listen to words, they also listen to behavior. And to do that, it's important to be able to read people. You read their body language, you read their facial expressions, you read how they move through their lives, how they interact with other people, because that is actually revealing to you more about what they think and how they feel, what they believe, and what they're likely to do in the future than anything else. Learning how to do that is one of the great keys to being a great leader. So there are 3 ways to improve your listening skills. Number 1, spend time, regular, rhythmic time with people. And when you're with them, make sure that you're doing that in formal and informal ways. And then you're asking great questions that are open-ended and empty. And then listen, see what they have to say. And then ask follow-up questions and extension questions. Number 2, listen for taboos. Listen for what's not being said. So often, the key to unsticking a problem or helping a team move to the next level, so often those are found in the taboos. Number 3, learn to listen to behavior. Behavior. When people's words and behavior don't match, trust their behavior. It's the best indicator of what's going to happen in the future unless there's an intervention that shifts their behavior. Hey, if you found that helpful, would you consider clicking subscribe? It's a great way to let us know that you like this content and you want more of it. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. How are you becoming a better listener? And what are the benefits of doing so?